Hello, everyone, and welcome to Phoenix Talks. I do apologize. This week I'm going to be flying solo. Diane has other issues, not issues, I'm sorry, that's the wrong word. She has other things that she needs to be present for. So I'm going to just have a conversation with you. I've opened up the Zoom chat in Phoenix Risers. If anyone is interested in going over to that chat on Messenger and Facebook and clicking the link and joining me, I'll let you in as soon as I see that you are knocking at the door. So that said, I wanted to have a conversation with you all about a post that I had put on Facebook last week. It was along the lines of be careful of how much you say, I want to be left alone, so that you don't actualize it. And give me just a moment while I go over to my own. One moment, I do apologize to technical difficulties. I don't have a producer, I'm doing this alone. All right, here we go. So I can, all right. This way I can see the YouTube chat at the same time. One of these days I'll have this all sorted out. But there was a little bit of confusion about what I meant about left alone. What does that mean? When I present to you that if we say too often that I want to be left alone, that's exactly what you produce in your surroundings, in your experience in life. Well, the thought that inspired it, I'll give you a little backstory now because it was a lot to type. But the backstory is there were some repairs that needed to be done on my car. I had the opportunity to take it over. Now, my mechanic is close enough that I could walk home, no problem. But I was experiencing a little bit of physical pain that day, and it was raining, and I was like, okay, I really don't want to have to walk home in the rain in pain. So who can I call? It took me about 15 minutes to go through a list in my head of potentials that I could. And I had this sudden wash of feeling alone because I didn't know who I could call. Fortunately, I had a neighbor's number and I reached out and he was more than happy to take me over. But in that time beforehand, I started thinking about, wow, how have I manifested to this level where I feel this lonely? So I thought back over the past year, especially with a lot of things that went on as I've been going through this growing coaching experience of pushing people away without realizing I was doing it. Getting upset with people because they weren't there when neither was I. So what we create in our thoughts when it comes to loneliness, sometimes, not always. There's exceptions to everything that I say that anyone says. I expressed on the messengers the other night that everyone is right and everyone is wrong. Truth is somewhere in between. That was a part that I didn't say. So whatever truth resonates with you in anything that I say, thank you so much for taking the time to listen. But for me, okay, let me give an example. Now, a lot of us growing up in the 80s and 90s, especially, and it started to continue to happen through the early 2000s. But for many of us, how many times did we sit down to dinner and the phone rang? First salesperson, and we, oh my God, leave me alone. Fast forward a few years. Every time your cell phone goes off, Messenger, Facebook, YouTube, Netflix, not Netflix, Instagram, text, phone rings, you're in the middle of something. Oh my God, just leave me alone. I don't have the capacity to deal with that right now. Okay, that's where it starts. Depending on the energetic that you put out when you have those thoughts, when you say those things, you put it outwards towards those people. Now, you can't speak for how they feel. You can't assume how they feel. They could feel ghosted. They could feel ignored. But the more that you don't want somebody around or somebody contacting you, when they stop, where's the internal going? If they don't start contacting you, or all of a sudden they just kind of fizzle out, these are things that we can manifest all on our own. Again, just my perception and a little bit of experience. So when we push people away and then get upset because they're not there, is their fault? Is there blame? Take it how you want to. Chalk it up to what you experience. And what you experience is a manifestation of the thoughts creating feelings inside based on your perceptions. This doesn't just apply to the feeling of loneliness. This applies to so many things. Don't have, don't want. I'm upset because I don't have. Meanwhile, I'm manifesting more of what I don't have because I'm spending so much time have it. So when we start thinking about how our thoughts manifest our lives and manifest our experiences, where's our focus? What are we focused on? Are we focused on loneliness? Are we focused on being poor? Are we focused on being scarce? Are we focused on being depressed? Or likewise, are we focused on gratitude, abundance, what we do have, who we do have? Because as we continue to reach outwards time and again, now, a lot of people are like, oh my God, how do I watch my thoughts like this? And it starts to drive them crazy. Well, I suppose it could. I've been told numerous times, watch your vibration, Micah, watch your vibration, because what you're putting out is what you're getting back. Well, if I have to play goalie for every single thought that I have, how can I stay sane? How can any of us stay sane if we're having to play goalie on every single thought that we have? Now, granted, we have 60 to 90,000 thoughts a day. That's exhausting to think about if you had to sit there and play goalie for everything that came to your mind. It's what you choose to pay attention to, what you choose to give energetic to, what you choose to focus on. When a thought comes in that we don't like, that produces a bad feeling, we have an option. We can either ride that coaster, or we can stop for a moment, take a look at it and say, is this something that I want to focus on? Do I need to focus on this? And that's an individual experience. And there's 8 billion different ones. We'll pause for a second and make a shout out to somebody who just joined in the chat. Thank you, Jamie, for joining me today. Appreciate you. Viewers won't see you unless you say something, so just a heads up on that. She's giving me the thumbs up. Thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate you. And I appreciate everybody. And for the viewers on YouTube, whether you're watching this live, whether you're watching the replay, if you ever have a question that you'd like to ask, you can either post it in the chat, or if you're on the Zoom call with me, you can just raise your hand and I will answer best I can. If I don't know, I don't know. You don't know what you don't know until you know what you don't know. Try saying that 5 times fast and it makes sense. But if you're watching the replay, seriously, and something doesn't make sense, or you have a question about something else, please put it in the chat and I will get notified by YouTube that somebody commented. But for the live viewers, I can answer it live. So what else do I want to talk about? Which rabbit hole do I want to go down about this feeling of left alone? Because a lot of people do, and it extends in varying ways to where people start to begin to suffer from agoraphobia, because they push people away so much and they start to become afraid of the outside world so much because they don't know what's going to happen. Yet at the same time, they're absolutely miserable, dying inside because they don't have any physical contact with the outside world. Are they to blame? Are the people in their lives to blame? We could sit here and play blame game, gossip, lower the vibration completely and get into that kind of discussion. But that doesn't help anyone. That just potentiates it. Had a wonderful experience yesterday. First time I've been out in a while, around people that I wasn't just delivering food to. In a setting where I could have a conversation, grown-up conversation, in person, not on the phone, not in text, didn't have to even have my phone out. It was beautiful. Yet it took everything I personally have. So this is coming from personal experience on how to overcome this. You just have to. Allow yourself the courage to just make the decision. Because literally the feeling that you're having about it is just based on a thought or 20. What are some of those thoughts? What are people going to think about me? Am I going to say the right thing? Am I going to get hurt? Am I going to have an anxiety attack? Because the last time I was around a big group of people, I started to feel really nervous and all I wanted to do was run. Thoughts like those. And if you felt alone, these thoughts aren't foreign. I've talked about vulnerability in other settings. I've created a masterclass talking specifically about that. But when you feel alone, you're on the fear side of vulnerable, thinking that the world is going to hurt you, that the world has hurt you, that you're a burden to the world. Guess what? You're not. And you're never as alone as you think you are. No one is. No one is as alone as they might feel that they are. There's always someone. And if there isn't someone, then allowing ourselves the courage to find that someone, to fill that void, to fill that gap. I could go down a whole nother branch and rabbit hole on where that could lead and why that becomes a fear for people. Because how many times have we, sufferers of loneliness, managed to attract the same kind of people that caused us to want to be left alone in the first place? And then we find those patterns happening. And we're like, God, why does this always happen? Because you assume it does. You've allowed yourself to have that agreement within yourself that that's all that you are allowed to have in your life are these kinds of people, because that's what makes you comfortable. But if you want something different, have a different thought. Let it be expressed outwards. I am worth having better than what I've been having. I am good enough to make new friends, meet new people. It's okay if I fumble, say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing. I don't know what's right and what's wrong always until I do something. In the post that all of this was wrapped around on Facebook, there was a comment. I don't get it. I hope that helped clear it up a little bit. But there was also a comment that stated that sometimes being left alone is a good thing. 100%. I wouldn't argue with that with anyone, because there are some times that we just need to escape from so that we can regain our center, so that we can decompress, so that we can review the thoughts that we've been having, look at things differently, and just be quiet. So I 100% agree with that comment. It's because you're about to, or if you're feeling completely overstimulated by life surrounding you and you just need a moment to regroup, 100%, please. I think we'd see a lot more peace in the world if more people did that. And were okay with that, and the people that were in their lives respected that. And I think that's one reason why so many people who do feel left alone push people away so much, because that isn't respected. I'm not going to lecture on that, because that would just turn into a lecture. I have to say, I'm going to interrupt myself right now. This is really weird, not having a conversation with Diane through this. So, welcome home, Hildy. I see you in the YouTube chat. Thank you for tuning in. I'm watching the captions that AI are creating for the broadcast, and it's fun to watch it try and correct itself based on what I say. Every time I say my business name or my smule name, it wants to type Brenda, because that's what it hears. I don't know if it's appropriate to share what happened yesterday. I'm going to try and keep it as vague as possible, because I don't want anyone to get upset. But at this wellness center, I've been asked to do a presentation there a couple weeks dealing with energetics. So I wanted to go over and get a feel for the atmosphere, the people that were there, meet the coordinator, manager, And after we sat and chatted for a while, got to know each other a little bit better, I sat down with a group of the people that were there. And I was just listening to the conversation that was going on. And I was inspired to share one of the alpha messages from my podcast, my other podcast radio show, The Messengers. And it wasn't the one that I had intended to play. And the person who, one of the people that were watching, once it was over, had become so triggered that I thought they were going to come across the table at me. Asking me, who are you? Why should I listen to you? What are you, what company are you affiliated? And it was just all anger coming at me. And I had that feeling of imposter syndrome start to well up. I know my face went flush. Heartbeat started to race, started to get a little nervous. How am I going to respond to this? I just took a few deep breaths, recognized that this wasn't about me. Many times, anger that people have towards each other isn't about the person that they're angry with. Not always, many times. Let me throw that in. But this person was truly upset because someone she had never met was sitting in front of her, throwing out a lecture or a speech, sermon, however you want to look at it and view it. When I start going off, I'm just having a conversation. Sometimes one-sided because I don't have a lot of people interacting. But she's like, why should I believe you? I said, you shouldn't. Why should I listen to everything that you have to say? You shouldn't. It's your choice. If it doesn't resonate with you, I'm fine with that. It doesn't resonate with everybody. And I'm fine with that. There were a lot of things that this reminded her of. I'm not going to go into detail. Don't need to. That led up to that explosion. I recognized that almost immediately. Had to get over my own self first. When somebody comes at you in general, it's an opportunity for you in that moment to recognize, are they angry at you? Or are they angry towards you? I've been talking about this one for years to people who know me. If they're angry at you, you just said something that really, really pissed them off directly, whether you meant to or not. If they're angry towards you, you said something to them that reminded them of other things they have yet to face. And that recognition, because we actually simultaneously had feelings towards each other that the other triggered without realizing it. I understood better, like I said, immediately, that this was towards me, and the feelings that I was having were towards her, not how she reacted. And a little while later, there was an apology given. I'm so sorry that I lit into you the way that I did. It's like, it's okay. I didn't take it personally. If we saw more of that, if we practice more of that. God, how big of a difference would that make? Try and instead of sorry, I just noticed that there was a question. I'll get to that in a second. Oh, are you asking about the difference between at and towards, Hildy? I need a better setup. So I don't have to look down to see the questions. Backtracking to where I was. But if we did see more understanding and recognition and have better communication with each other and know that we're all different in our experiences, I think we'd feel less left alone, less depressed, less angry, less needing to regurgitate gossip. It's the nicest way I can put that phrase. But the difference between at and towards, once again, okay, when you are feeling an emotion at somebody, it is a direct response to that particular person and what they said or did. If you are feeling an emotional response towards somebody, then it is a result of it reminding you. It's a trigger from inside that reminds you of somebody or something else that's still inside. Does that help? It's a little confusing to grasp at first, especially if it's out of a one of those moments. I'm gonna put Jamie on the spot. Do you have a question for me?
Not directly.
Indirectly?
Um, in regards to what you've been talking about,
Or in general?
how about this? How do you feel about the earthquake yesterday with the eclipse happening on Monday?
I feel that everybody is right and everybody is wrong in what they're saying about that. That's what I feel, honestly, because, you know, especially in the Northeast in the last several days, we have experienced a heavy, heavy rainfall. And one thing that people don't understand enough about earthquakes is water displacement, where when there is a large amount of water dumped in a short amount of time in specific areas, especially if there's a fault line, which I can't remember the name of right now. It can cause, I don't know if this is correct, I haven't seen it verified yet, but this is my personal theory that because of all of the water that just fell, we had water displacement and it caused a lot of friction, literally. As far as it being close to the eclipse, well, we know that the position of the moon has a lot to do with tides and weather. We know that explosions from the sun have a lot to do with what we experience on a geomagnetic level, and it can also mess with the meteorological phenomena and good grief lately. I don't know if many people know, but a giant tornado was sent off of the sun last week. Now, We think that an F5 is big. Imagine one the size of half of Jupiter, spouting off into space. We're in the path. So yeah, on a different energetic level, well, there's a lot of shit going on right now in the world, period. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of worry. There's love too. There is hope too. But if you combined all of these all at the same time, easiest blame is, oh, we're about to have an eclipse. Does it play a role? Sure. But good grief, people, stop arguing about it, because you're all right and you're all wrong. Because not a single living soul on this planet knows 100% of the truth. Not one. And the more that we are humble about that fact, the less stress we produce. Jamie knows I'm a perfectionist at an unhealthy level sometimes. I mean, my goodness, I spent 6 hours this week on one song just to learn one part or two, because I wanted it done right. But at the same time, I also recognize I'm not perfect. I posted in another group that I'm in with David Key, one of my mentors, about the experience, because it was the song was Skid Row from Little Shop of Horrors. And one of the parts that I was given was to sing the ending of Seymour's lines. Now, his ending note is really high, especially for me now, after years of being a tenor and now being a baritone. I was concerned and was almost convinced that I wasn't going to be able to hit that note, and that I was just going to have to stay on the lower note of the chord. So after several hours of getting other parts learned and approaching when I was going to record this particular part, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to try. Nailed it. First try. Didn't have to redo. But that's not the point of the story. Just because I did it right once doesn't mean I'm going to do it right every single time, and I'm okay with that. Because perfection is a myth that we tell ourselves. Interesting rabbit hole you sent me down, Jamie. Thank you. I give Hildy a chance to catch up in the YouTube chat. I know she's still watching. If you have a question, Hildy, that you'd like to ask, please type it in the chat and I'll get to it as soon as I see it. But yeah, that was an amazing experience, because I gave myself permission to try something that I didn't think that I could do, because I thought that I was going to fail at it. The only way that I would have failed at that is if I didn't try at all. That's the definition of failure. We seem to keep confusing what failure actually is. Whoa, that could be I actually want to have a full conversation with Diane when she comes back. We're going to have a full episode on failure alone, because that's another big one. I'm purposefully avoiding the topic that we're going to talk about next week altogether, which we're going to continue from. God, I kind of lost track, but I know that last week's episode inspired me immediately after that. I want to talk next week about justification, because that's another thing that we all experience. I'm being pushed to go back to fear of being alone. Some experience it, some don't. Some embrace it, some won't. Rhyming on purpose, I don't know why. Some people don't need human contact. So most of what I've said doesn't apply. Some need no physical contact because of everything I said. Why? There's so many variables about aloneness, loneliness, being alone. Question is, where do you fit in? How does it affect you? If it affects you on a depressive level, there's always someone to talk to. If it affects you on an anxious level, there's ways to get around it. A lot of stepping out of comfort zones. If anybody has ever been to an amusement park, stood in line, watching a ride go, listening to the screams of the people on it, not knowing if they are completely terrified or completely enjoying it, or both. Nervous about being flung about quickly. And you get up to the turnstile. It's your turn to go on the next round. You have the option right then, right there, to walk through, take a seat, or to walk to the other side and miss the ride. Overcoming things is a lot like that. Overcoming anxieties and fears. Also, sometimes it's just a recognition that the fear that you're experiencing is just a feeling. It's not real. It's a feeling you're experiencing based on a thought of what if, what could. I love that. In the YouTube chat, Hilda just said that her best paintings were when she threw away her pencil to outline what she was going to paint and just start with the brush. I love that. So many times do we try and just get those lines just right, and then, oh man, I messed up, and then you got to erase. Great thing about painting is that you can cover up the mistakes and it becomes something beautiful. Instead of trying to make it something beautiful, it just becomes. Wow, I've managed to ramble on for 40 minutes. I'm impressed. But for people who feel alone, forget that it's something that's manifested, okay? Because that's in the past already. What do you want now? Where do you want to be now? Where do you want to go now? What do you want to focus on now? And I'm not talking to the people that enjoy the feeling of being alone, being left alone directly. For those the battle, that depressive, heavy feeling. Okay. You know the feeling, but you also know the feeling of laughter. You also know the feeling of joy. You also know the feeling of hope. You also know the feeling of love. Those don't go away either. But sometimes seeking those things is a little less comfortable than wrapping in the blanket of what we know. Because that's not scary, even if we know it's harmful. So I'm going to leave you with that. Yes. Thanks everyone thank you, Jamie, for joining me on Zoom and helping bridge that gap between sitting alone in my condo having the conversation, so to speak. But I appreciate you. Thank you, Hildy, for tuning in. And thank you, everyone, for listening and watching Phoenix Talks. I appreciate you. Diane appreciates you. She will rejoin me next week at our regular time. Just remember, April 27th, things are going to be a little bit different. We haven't exactly figured out what we're going to do for that day because I do have an event and won't be able to be on for that day live anyway. If we have the opportunity to record something ahead of time, we absolutely 100% will. Otherwise, April 27th will not be. And I hope everyone has a wonderful week. Please be safe on Monday if you venture outside and it's not raining. I was checking the weather today and looks like the best spots are going to be cloud covered. So please be safe. Don't look directly at the sun, directly at your phone, because either way you can cause problems with your vision. There, I've lectured about that. Otherwise, enjoy the energy, set your intentions, reset your focus on what you want to have. And remember that if you focus on what you don't want to have, you're still focusing on what you want. We'll work that out in another conversation. But have a wonderful evening, afternoon. Jamie, I will let you know now that as soon as I hit end, it's going to end the Zoom call. So thank you again. I appreciate you so much.